Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming to Fire Station number 1. I'm Tim Butler, the St. Paul Fire Chief. As we learned earlier in the presentation, this is a live fire station, so stay clear of the doors and the pole holes. On behalf of the 475 men and women of the St. Paul Fire Department, welcome you to Fire Station number 1 this morning. My standing orders to the department members are to make our fire stations safe havens in the neighborhood, places free of violence and fear, and filled with compassion, hope, and help. So welcome to our fire station safe haven this morning. I'd like to introduce you to the first speaker today, Mayor Chris Coleman.
Thank you, and thank you for your leadership in all aspects of our public safety realm. It is good that we are here today, but I always am kind of saddened that we have to be here on a yearly basis to confront the continuing and ongoing problem of violence in our communities against our families, the victims of domestic violence that suffer so much, too often suffer in silence, too often suffer not knowing where to go or how to get help, or even what to do. But I'm so proud of the work that we have done in this community to forge a new way forward for victims of domestic violence, to protect our families, to protect our children. It is critically important that this work continue, but I wish that the need for this work would someday go away. We've had a lot of success on different fronts. The Blueprint for Safety, the Flare Up Project, the Victim Service Center, domestic violence programs, government agencies, culturally specific services, and collaborations that continue to create new and better ways to reach and to serve victims. We've improved our ability to hold dangerous perpetrators accountable for their violence and offer real opportunities for offenders to examine and change their behaviors. But even with how far we have come, we're still confronted and bewildered by the lives of this horrendous crimes claim every year. And this past year has been no exception. Surrounding us are 18 t-shirts which represent the victims who died in Minnesota in 2012 due to domestic violence. Even more distressing than those 18 deaths is the fact that to date in 2013, that number has almost doubled. Of the 35 people who have died this year, many have not reached out to police or domestic violence programs for help. And many were murdered while attempting to flee their perpetrators. I know as we stand here today, we're filled with a powerful mixture of emotions, weariness, grief, pride, determination, but most importantly, hope. There's a prevailing belief that no matter what we do, there will always be some sort of domestic violence. I'm here today to tell you that that is not true. We can, and we must put an end to these tragedies. It's our optimism and our belief that we have a role in shaping a better tomorrow that unites us and moves us forward. As we witness the pledges stated here today, we'll each reach even further to touch the victim who is so paralyzed by fear that she is unable to seek help. We'll connect even closer with a range of community programs so no gaps will exist in linking our services. And we'll spread our message even further until every member of our community becomes a conduit to help and an instrument of hope. It is sad to see the tragedies that we have witnessed this last year in St. Paul, in the Twin Cities, around the state of Minnesota. We cannot allow more victims. We must make sure that we unite as a community to prevent domestic violence and to stop the scourge of murders of our vulnerable victims. We have the commitment, we have the will. Now let's get it done. I'm so proud to be a part of a city that understands that as well as any other place that I've ever witnessed. Part of that is the leadership of our police chief, who has made this a personal mission of his. I want to thank him and introduce Police Chief Tom Smith.
I think we're a little out of order here, but that's all right. He's the mayor and he gets to do that. So I will get us back in order in a couple seconds here. But I want to thank everybody for being here today. And to let you know, the St. Paul Police Department on average responds to about 8,000 domestic calls for service every single year. And it gives our officers a unique opportunity, including our family violence unit, to make a difference in victims' lives and provide services with our partners in our advocacy groups, such as St. Paul Intervention, and also Bridges for Safety. These are partners that are second to none. But most importantly, it also allows us to do investigations and to hold violent offenders accountable for their actions, especially repeat offenders, and also give them an opportunity to change if they so desire to do so. That's an important part of the work that we do. But the most important is the partnerships that we share again with our partners. I can't say enough about St. Paul Intervention Project. You'll hear more about them in a little bit. I can't say enough about Bridges for Safety, because these organizations give mothers and families an opportunity to break that silence of a violent cycle of violence. I've always said, and many of you heard me say this before, we should never, ever, ever have a blind eye, and I mean this, a deaf tongue, when we know someone who may be suffering from domestic violence. And in fact, that is the key to our success. The key to our success is for people to come forward. And even if they don't want to come forward to a St. Paul police officer in our fine city here in St. Paul, we have these groups that can be the advocates for us. And I have many stories that I could tell you here today, how people came forward to Bridges for Safety first, or St. Paul Intervention, and then through our partnership, we've been able to hold offenders accountable. I want to tell you just a couple things here that, in closing out my message this morning, that I want everybody to understand. And I'm going to read those so I don't miss any. For victims, we are here to help you, and you do not deserve to be battered. The justice system has an understanding of the reality of living with battering. We are here to protect you, however long that is. So please, please come forward. Even if you're a friend of a victim, come forward. Let us know. Let us start that healing process. We do not want to increase the danger to you and your children. And we work to diminish the power the batterer has over you and your family. And that work is done with passion and understanding. There are advocates who will provide you with 24-hour confidential support and services throughout the entire process. So again, the partnership. I will end with this story. It's true. I was in Philadelphia earlier this week for the International Association of Chiefs of Police Conference, 13,000 people strong from all over the world. And I had the opportunity to attend a Victim Services Award Luncheon. Very unique, small group of people. Assistant Chief Kathy Wernan actually serves on that committee on a national basis. And I was there, and a person, I see Vernita Carter is here today from Breaking Free. I don't know where you went. There she is. Joy Friedman, who works for Breaking Free, told her story. And in that audience was the Assistant United States Attorney General. Her name is Carol Mason. She's in charge of victim services for the Office of Justice Programming. And Joy told her story about breaking the cycle and getting out of the life of prostitution, but how it started through domestic violence and through the partnerships and the advocates that helped her along the way. And I couldn't believe it, because she showed a video. She talked about Jerry Vick. Jerry Vick's with our sexual, or Jerry has lost his life, but Jerry helped us start our human trafficking unit, the Gerald Vick Human Trafficking Unit. But there's connection with domestic violence. That was the key. So at the end of this presentation, the Assistant United States Attorney General sought me out and said, "Chief, I want to tell you something. I know we have more work to do, and as you heard the mayor say, we all know we have more work to do. We want to wipe this out. We need all of your help." But that Miss Mason said to me, "You know what, Chief? Wherever I go in the United States, I use the St. Paul Police Department and their work with their advocacy groups as a model for other police departments throughout the country." So I was supposed to end with that positive note, and I do believe it's positive, and I know we have more work to do, and I'm off script, so I'm gonna introduce the next speaker here, and I will come back up at the end and get us back on track. And I want to bring up one of our best partners, Sarah Gruing, who is the city attorney for the city of St. Paul. We could not do our work without Sarah, also with our fine county attorney, John Choi, who you'll hear from in a second. So Sarah?
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Chief, and thank you, Mayor, for that kind introduction. That's what it says right here. I want to just take a moment and introduce some of my colleagues who work in the trenches on these issues day in and day out. Laura Peaton is the Deputy City Attorney for the St. Paul City Attorney's Office. Maria DeWolf is the Managing Attorney for the Domestic Unit. Also joining us today, Tony Tedesco is a Senior Prosecutor in our office. And David Palm and Louise Siba, who work so hard with our Public Housing Authority on so many of these issues every day. So it is my profound honor to work with all of them every day on these issues related to domestic violence. And we handle roughly 900 cases a year in the city of St. Paul, and we have record high conviction rates. But obviously, as we know, we look around us, we see the stories from this year, we know that's just simply not enough. The facts continue to stagger and the stories continue to break our hearts. 1 in 4 women have been victims of severe physical violence by an intimate partner. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention estimates that 42 million United States women will be subject to rape, physical violence, and/or stalking by an intimate partner in their lifetime. Annually, over 1,400 orders for protection are filed in Ramsey County. It is estimated that 1 out of every 9 children are exposed to some form of family violence each year, and men have been victims too. We have rich community and extraordinary government alliances in St. Paul and throughout Ramsey County. From these alliances, we have developed programs and protocols that have saved lives and changed the way we respond to domestic abuse. The Blueprint for Safety has increased justice systems accessibility, accountability, services, and protections for all victims of domestic violence at each point of case processing, from that first 911 call to when the defendant is off paper. The Flare Up Project encompasses a cross-disciplinary team of police, advocates, prosecutors, and probation officers to flag and hold accountable highly lethal and repeat chronic offenders, swiftly apprehend dangerous perpetrators who have fled the scene before police arrival, and increase on-site advocacy services for victims who are at high risk of imminent harm. And I'll also go off script just for a minute. A lot of you in this room know that Shelley is kind enough to hold this toward the end of October every year so that we can also take a moment to honor Paul and Sheila Wellstone and their extraordinary work on this issue. Many of you know my first job in politics was as a domestic and family violence intern in Senator Wellstone's office. And what that meant is that my assignment was really primarily to work with Sheila. And my first assignment, my first day on the job, and this is dating me a little bit because it was about 15 years ago, but was to physically go through the newspaper and cut out domestic abuse stories. And I would clip them all together with a paper clip, and I would put them on the left-hand side of her red folder. So when she landed Friday night from Washington, she would have these stories clipped together. And then over the weekend, sometimes with Paul, sometimes on her own, she would reach out to advocates or the families themselves. She would visit hospitals. She would quietly and without press or anyone knowing, she would make contact with these families in some way and assure them that they had an advocate in Washington. So, and it's almost Pavlovian now, even 15 years later, when I see a story, I think, oh, that goes in Sheila's file, that goes in Sheila's pocket. And unfortunately, there were too many stories in Sheila's pocket this year, and I think that we know that we can all do a lot better in her name and in the name of all these victims who have suffered so greatly. So we, as the City of St. Paul, the St. Paul Police Department, and the City Attorney's Office commit to all of you today that we will never become complacent in our response to domestic crimes. We will continuously examine and initiate methods to advance the critical work that all of us do. We will continue our close relationship and effective partnerships with so many people in this room, with advocates and the community as a whole. We will readily share our stories and our learnings with jurisdictions across the state towards one day ending domestic abuse once and for all. It is now also my profound honor and privilege to introduce my partner across the street who handles felony domestic abuse prosecutions in St. Paul and Ramsey County and is such an extraordinary advocate on these issues, John Choi.
First of all, it's really great to be here with all of you, people from our community who have taken time out of your busy day to reflect on this moment and on this month, which is Domestic Violence Prevention and Awareness Month, because that is so important, because the progress that we have made around the issues of domestic violence all originate from the community response. The people in our community saying that we no longer want to tolerate this crime in our community. And it's an opportunity for us to reflect on some of the successes that we have made, and we've come a really long way if we go back 10, 20, 30 years. It's also an opportunity to make sure that we don't forget about those victims that have been taken from us because of domestic violence, and those survivors that remain. And also to recognize that with respect to this problem and this issue of violence against women and domestic violence, that there really never is a finish line, because our work is never done. And this year, despite all of the great efforts that we have made in St. Paul and in Ramsey County and across the state, this year has been a really tough year for many of us, because we've had so many instances of people being murdered in a domestic context. So we commit to, as a community, to do more and to do better. But I also wanted to take an opportunity, and at Shelley's urging, to talk about another crime that is so connected and so related to domestic violence, which is the trafficking of human beings in our community. And there are so many parallels with respect to the victim being in a situation that she cannot escape from. Oftentimes, these trafficking situations happen in domestic contexts. And this is a horrific crime that we are now starting to pay more attention to, and we've made great progress. But again, the progress that we have made around the trafficking, the sex trafficking of children and young women, can also be attributed to some of the good things that we have learned from the work that we've been doing around domestic violence. I think that one of the great things that we have here in our community and in Minnesota is that we really truly have a very robust victim-centered approach. People in the system are focused on the victim and doing everything that we can to hold the offender accountable. And that can't happen unless we have and we support organizations like St. Paul Intervention and so many others that are involved in helping victims. And if you help victims, what happens is that they then start trusting people in the system. And so for domestic violence, we've come a long way, and now we're starting to do that in the area of sex trafficking. I see Vanita Carter with Breaking Free, who has been doing this for decades. And we are now understanding that taking this victim-centered approach, looking at women and young girls who are caught up in this situation, looking at them as victims of crime, children in need of protection, and not as delinquents or criminals, that has come a long way. And we have been able to double the amount of trafficking prosecutions against those who are truly the criminals in the state of Minnesota because of that victim-centered approach. And so we will continue with that victim-centered approach in sex trafficking, but also in domestic violence as well. And I want to thank all of you, the community, for being a part of this really important effort to end this horrific crime. So thank you very much.
Thanks, John. It's a privilege to serve alongside you at the county, and Chief Butler, Shelley, thank you so much for hosting this. I really appreciate it. And part of my remarks, I'm looking at the front row with my colleague, Chief John Harrington, who's many of what this, how do I want to say this? Let me pause and say it. It's this, that John had a strong vision when he was the St. Paul Police Chief, and it was one of those areas that I think, I'm seeing our other brothers and sisters in blue, and it was one of those audacious goals. How can we interrupt what's going on in our families? Because we believe if we actively do this, we can actually reduce homicide in our community. So, as good soldiers, we marched forward. And as a result, you made a huge difference in the city of St. Paul and helped launch the blueprint. And you continued that as senator, and now here you are as chief, and I think that shows your commitment to this effort. So, Chief, thank you very much for that. You know, I was thinking about sometimes in these circumstances, you get asked, you know, Sheriff, what works? And sometimes I can think of first what doesn't work. And I can tell you what doesn't work is when we each try to do this by ourselves. And when I look around this room, what a tremendous encouragement it is. You think, can you encourage law enforcement? By your presence here, you do. Because you're telling us that we're not doing this alone and that we have partners. Because there's only a short period of time that we interact in the lives of the men and women that are struggling with domestic violence issues. So thank you for being the wind beneath our wings in many ways and helping make our community stronger, because the men and women that are locked in this situation, like I said, they see us for but a blip in their lives, and you are that long-standing piece that strengthens them. So we appreciate you for doing that and your commitment to participating alongside of us. And the other thing is that our ability to do this, not just in a city, but to say this is an important value for our county. We've been able to do that as a county, and that's continued to strengthen across not just a blueprint for safety in the city of St. Paul, but countywide. All 17 communities in Ramsey County, I'm proud to say, are participating in the blueprint for safety. And I think that is worthy of acknowledgement for all of our police chiefs and city attorneys throughout our county. So it's a great thing, and many of you probably didn't even know that, or maybe you just assumed that it had happened. Well, it is done, and it's very, very exciting, and it's because of the leadership that we've had in St. Paul to make that possible and extend it further. And the last thing I wanted to mention is you sometimes wonder, you know, what do people value? And I think we show our value sometimes in what we say, we show our value sometimes in what we contribute to financially, but truly I think we show what's important by where we spend our time. And today, this is where we're spending our time. This is the month that we've spent trying to articulate why this is important, and as leaders, trying to be an encouragement to you, to let you know that the core leadership in the city and throughout the county is here to support you, and we thank you very much for your continued commitment throughout the year. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matt. I was told that we needed to introduce ourselves, and I appreciate the fact that you've introduced the St. Paul Ramsey County public health person. And I do appreciate having an opportunity to be here with everyone today. I appreciate being invited to participate. I think as I look out amongst you and through my many years of work in the public health field, I truly can say it's those of us who work in domestic violence work see it as a personal commitment, not just a professional commitment. I do want to say to all of you who have had experienced domestic violence that I personally, and I think my colleagues in the healthcare profession, need to stay focused on your behalf on this issue in our community, how we see your strength to leave those situations that are so devastating to you individually and to your families in our community, help keep us strong and committed to this particular issue. So I thank you for those of you who are here today and participating with us on this issue. I do appreciate the fact that I'm part of this event today where we are asked to renew our commitment, which is across jurisdictions and across systems, to focus on ending domestic violence. I think has been said here is that it is something that takes a lot of effort, and that we will, focus on ending violence, but it's not clearly within our sights to be done today, but in the future. Domestic violence is seriously a public health concern, not just in the number of individuals that it impacts, but in the fact that lives are lost and there's a serious long-term health impact that goes just not to individuals, but to our entire families and communities. Substantial health care costs associated with the issue of domestic violence. Many people just think about the immediate trauma and the immediate health care interventions, but it goes far beyond that. It is issues that are involved in long-term chronic health conditions for individuals and their families, and that cuts across physical issues as well as mental health issues. We know that children who witness domestic violence are at great, great risk for consequences for their own health and well-being today and in the future. Our healthcare system is truly in a unique position to assist and be a partner in this effort to end domestic violence. I look at it as areas of three different interventions: in prevention, in identification and intervention, and in connection to community resources. And if we think about all the different times where we can access health care services, not just in an emergency department, but in our primary care clinics, in times when we go into our mental health system, when we look at all of the health practitioners that can be involved, not just from hospitals, but from healthcare clinic providers to dentists, mental health counselors, nurses, and so on. So think about all the different points of access at times in our lives and across the ages and all different conditions. I do want to mention the fact that pregnancy can be a key trigger, a situation in individuals' lives where violence becomes more dangerous and sometimes and creates very life-threatening conditions for our women. We know that homicide is a leading cause of traumatic death for pregnant and postpartum women. All health practitioners need to be involved in domestic violence prevention and response. In Ramsey County and indeed throughout the state of Minnesota, the healthcare community, I believe, has been a leader in trying to address the issue of domestic violence, not just for being educated about domestic violence, but for learning skills and in training in how to screen for and provide appropriate and successful interventions. And again, that connection with our community partners is so vital, and that's part of our education, knowing what's in our community, what's available, and having immediate kind of connection to those patients that come into our doors. I think at this particular moment of time, the healthcare community has been charged with revitalizing and re-energizing and being recommitted to working on reducing the efforts or reducing the incidence of violence, domestic violence, and also to make a renewed effort to indeed stop the domestic violence that occurs in our lives. And I am pleased again to be a part of providing that kind of commitment on behalf of a healthcare community and on behalf of my role as St. Paul Ramsey County Public Health Director. Thank you very much.
Good morning again, Tim Butler from St. Paul Fire. And as Rena mentioned, there's a broad scope of services and needs. St. Paul Fire fills a very narrow but intense and important piece of that. We provide fire suppression and paramedic services to the city of St. Paul. Emergency medical calls are our vast majority of our calls, and many of those involve the victims and the families who have been victims of domestic violence. So we see some firsthand, some of the devastation and the persistent emotional and physical injuries resulting from the violence. We're committed to helping break that cycle and end the abuse. Our paramedics ensure that the victims of domestic abuse receive the highest quality physical care, but as we've seen today and as you've experienced, the needs extend beyond the physical, and the entire community must work together to eliminate the fear, the intimidation, the isolation, and the harm that victims face long before the emergency call occurs. St. Paul Fire is wholly committed to working closely with the Partners United here today, and I'm very glad to have you all here today, the victims and their families, to provide essential prevention, response, and support services to the victims and to provide long-term protection that they and their family and their children need. As I mentioned, the St. Paul fire stations have been safe havens in our neighborhoods for over 150 years. They're places of warmth and safety and protection and welcome. You're welcome here anytime, under any circumstances, and we stand with you today and tomorrow to end the violence and make our entire community a safe haven for everyone. Thanks for being here today.
Good morning. We would like to recognize the women and men who have died this year in Ramsey County due to domestic violence. The names we will read represent individuals who were murdered by a current or former intimate partner or while attempting to protect a family member or friend from a dangerous perpetrator.
A little difference in height here. As was stated, I'm Victoria Reinhardt, Ramsey County Commissioner, and I want to talk about really the numbers that are becoming overwhelming, not only in our county and city, but in our state. And since others have gone off script, I'm going to go off script just a little bit here. From personal experience, over 30 years ago, I know that we have come a long way. And I want to say something, two very simple messages that are difficult to do for those that are involved in an abusive relationship. And that is, one, there is never, ever an excuse for violence. And the other is, there is help, and you should reach out because it's there for you. I did. With each name we will read, we know that as a community, we will not forget. For each of these tragedies reinforces our collective determination to never again have to lose a member of our community due to domestic violence.
Monia Johnson, St. Paul, age 32.
Kira Steger, St. Paul, age 30.
Pania Yang, St. Paul, age 27.
Anna Hurd, Maplewood, age 16.
Nancy A. Sullivan, Shoreview, age 57.
Sherelle Montrese Craighead, St. Paul, age 30.
Marg Urang, St. Paul, age 50.
Staff Sergeant Brandon Horst, St. Paul, age 25.
Perry Paulson, Mounds View, age 49.
Kong Meng Lee, St. Paul, age 18.
Joseph Yang, Roseville, age 33.
And if we could take a moment of silence for these and other victims.
Thank you all for being here today. I'm Bree Adams-Bill from the St. Paul Intervention Project, and with me today is my coworker, colleague, and warrior, Gianna Smith.
Thank you. Although we have suffered such tragic losses in our community, we have experienced hundreds of successes in reaching victims and assisting them in obtaining the services and protections that they deserve. As a grassroots domestic violence program, we serve over 5,400 battered women and children each year. As a partner with many others who are here today, over 1,200 victims are served annually through our collective victim service center, Bridges to Safety. The Partnership for Domestic Abuse Services, otherwise known as PDAS, continues its domestic violence work well beyond the creation of a victim service center to address the victims of all victims of abuse and of the children who are impacted by this crime. Our members include Asian Women United of Minnesota, Casa de Esperanza, Family Wise Services, Outfront of Minnesota, the Ramsey County Attorney's Office, Ramsey County Adult Protection, the Ramsey County Sheriff's Office, Workforce Solutions, the Domestic Abuse Harassment Office, the St. Paul City Attorney's Office, the St. Paul Domestic Abuse Intervention Project, the St. Paul Mayor's Office, the St. Paul Police Department, Southern Minnesota Regional Legal Services, Tubman, Women of Nations, and Women's Advocates.
Additional programs within and beyond our city and county borders also work with us in this critical work, including the Minnesota Coalition for Battered Women, Breaking Free, Alexandra House, Praxis International, the Domestic Abuse Project, and Cornerstone. The invaluable support of our government, private foundations, and individual contributions truly enables us to do this critical work. And an array of in-kind donations from local business like Detail Style Lab, who will provide free services to our participants, and to Briggs & Morgan, who donate countless hours of service, all add to our one collective voice. A voice, as witnessed in this very room, that says, we stand as a community in saying no more. No more beatings, no more terror, and no more searching for help. For we, all of us here, are here to help you. Thank you.
I get to close this out here, and I just want to say thank you to all our partners here, the leadership of Mayor Coleman, who really takes an active role in making sure that domestic violence gets stamped out in our city, promotes it, all of our partners that are right behind us here, amazing work that they do. And I just want to tell you as a police officer, and I want to thank the St. Paul police officers and the county sheriffs and our fighter brothers and sisters that are here. You know, one of the toughest calls you'll ever go on, and the most dangerous call, is domestic violence. And when you go into that call, I will tell you that I still have scars that are here, and I'm going to speak for my brother and sister officers and firefighters that say they never forget what they see. Those faces of children, of women, of men in some cases, that have been truly victimized. But here's the good news. Guess what? Because of all of you and many of you that are here today, because of the tireless efforts of someone that we need to recognize, Ms. Shelley Johnson Klein, I've also seen the success stories, the smiles. Shelley, thank you. The success stories, the smiles on the faces of children, and also the smiles on the faces of family members that have been reunited and have broken that cycle. I get to see it all the time. I've got a daughter that was just up here to speak. I have another daughter that works at Bridges for Safety. I know how important this work is. It really is. General Colin Powell has one simple statement. He always used to say to his troops, it can be done. My friends, not only can it be done, it is being done. So to close us out today, we have individuals going to come up and sing a special song for us. And at this time, I'd like to have Brittany Setzer come up and close.
When I'm lost in the rain, in your eyes I know I'll find a light to light my way. When I'm scared, losing ground, when my world is going crazy, you can turn it all around. And when I'm down, you're there pushing me to the top. You're always there giving me all you got. For a shield from the storm, for a friend, for a love to keep me safe and warm. I turn to you for the strength to go on, for the will to carry on, for turn to you, yeah, when I lose the will to win. I just reach for you and I can reach the sky again. I can do anything, 'cause your love is so amazing, 'cause your love inspires me. And when I need a friend, you're always on my side, giving me strength to get me through the night. For a shield from the storm, for a friend, for a love to keep me safe and warm, I turn to you for strength to move on, for the will to carry